What's up, everybody? Welcome in to another edition of SSPN Postgame. Unfortunately, this is not a joyous edition in the sense that the Spurs got absolutely smacked for the third straight time this season by the Memphis Grizzlies, but it is a joyous occasion in the sense that this is Ethan Quintero's first episode back on the show with De'Aaron Fox as a San Antonio Spur. And we're going to get into that later after we get through our game breakdown here, because despite how ugly this is and the circumstances that surround it, as the Spurs are still waiting for certain pieces to come in. And also we were, just kind of out of one rotation player. I think conditioning was something that you kind of saw a little bit tonight, definitely at the end. That's not the reason the Spurs lost. God forbid. We'll get into that. But I do think that, of course, just with the nature of working through the trades, being down a guy in the rotation, I think that did affect the Spurs tonight for sure. But of course, we're going to get to that a little bit later. Let's just jump in to this Memphis Grizzlies game. Let me see if the final has happened. Yes, it has officially. This one's over. Let me bring this up on the screen share. The Spurs fall to the Memphis Grizzlies 128 to 109, Ethan. I'll just dish it to you here for some overall thoughts, and then I'll kind of play off that and give you some of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, it started off like it was going to be a really competitive game, really entertaining. We had high energy playing with great pace. Victor was kind of going toe-to-toe with Ja Morant for a little bit in that first quarter. And then things quickly derailed. Jude, we had 23 turnovers for the night. That started in that second quarter. I believe the Memphis Grizzlies went on a 19-0 run starting in that second quarter as well, going into the third quarter. Competitive third overall, but it was not enough to get back into the game. I think one of the big keys for us was not only turnovers, but Devin had a really off shooting night. Devin Vassell, 1 for 6 from 3. And it doesn't help when you let Jaren Jackson Jr. go 3 of 9 from 3, 31 points. And John Moran had an easy 25 and 11. Didn't even feel like he was really pushing himself. And then, of course, GG Jackson, like Mbeezy's saying in the comments, at 11 for 20 off the bench at 27 points. I think he missed the first 42 games of the season.
Yep.
So he's kind of just getting back into game shape and took this one personally against the Spurs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you summed up obviously a lot of the ailments of this game tonight. I think for me, just when I look at it as a holistic view, team defense and turnovers. Those are really
Yeah.
the two keys that stand out for me. Something that was present throughout the night. Even when the Spurs had good moments, they were able to fight back from that huge run, like you mentioned, to kind of get back into the game with Stephon Castle really leading the charge there with that in the second quarter. The other thing or here, remind me where I'm at, Ethan. I'm sorry.
You were talking about the second quarter, Stephon Castle leading the charge.
And that was the comeback that I was
Uh-huh.
talking about there. I'm sorry. I
Team
completely
defense,
blanked.
maybe?
Yes, that's that's what I was getting to. Sorry. With the also we haven't mentioned this. This is a little bit later than we expected as well, with the fan who suffered a heart attack right before the game,
Right.
which delayed the tip of that. So I wanted to send our thoughts, prayers, condolences to that. From what I heard through the telecast, it seems like they had a pulse when they were leaving. So that's obviously really good news. But the reason I bring that up, it's a little bit later. So I was kind of losing my train of thought there. But talking about the team defense specifically, this is the point I was going to get to, Ethan. Even in the good moments that the Spurs had all night, whether it was a cut or a spot up open three, that last rotation on defense, we were just late all night. Like sometimes there would be somebody trailing, but it was like already after the shot was up, or like I'm thinking of GG Jackson late in the
Mhm.
game, driving inside, and it's just like out of nowhere, he's driving. It's almost like an elevator cut, like a reverse elevator cut where you're driving inside instead of to the 3-point line. And it was just like there were three guys that were already under the basket, but nobody was out on the perimeter covering GG Jackson, who was driving inside for then what became an easy layup. So, like I said, whether it was a cut or a spot up shot, that last rotation on defense, we were slow on all night.
Yeah, and I think the problem really stems from what Mbeezy's saying in the comments right now, Jude. It's the backup center spot not really being solidified right now. Bassey had a few minutes. He looked like he may have gotten a left knee injury again, but the Sohan Barnes playing center is not the solution, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why we've recently gotten out of rotations. and been behind one guy the entire time because Wemby's having to help a lot more than he should have to when he's in the game, and then when he's not in the game, it's basically team defense against whatever center, whether it be Zach Edey, Jaren Jackson
Mhm.
Jr. And when that
Yes.
occurs, somebody's going to be open, and Memphis is a good enough team with good enough playmakers, to move the ball. And credit to them, their ball movement was spectacular as far as like penetrating, touching the paint, kicking out, rotate. And we were behind, like you're saying. So whenever that's the case, it's going to be a struggle for the Spurs because of our matchup difficulties.
Yeah, and when you combine that with a lot of self-inflicted, turnovers, as we see Winky just really wanted to be the star of the show here. If you're listening on podcast, y'all got to go on YouTube and check out the video so you can get a cameo from the Spurs cat here on SSPN. But getting back to the game, man, like you said, and especially like when you harped on with Emezy's point down there, and this is something we've been talking about, and I think that's the reason why later in the game you saw Charles Bassey get some minutes, because in that initial rotation in the first quarter, we were just rolling with Harrison Barnes and center Sohan off the bench, and immediately it's like we're seeing Zach Edey and Jeremy Sohan matched up against each other, and that was just creating easy buckets for him. And the other thing that also comes with this Memphis matchup, it's not just Zach Edey. You're dealing with Santi Aldama playing the four off the bench as well. So you've got 2 7-footers off the bench
Yep.
for the Memphis Grizzlies. And again, that was what we were kind of running out there. And of course, you're going to be at a rebounding deficit when that happens. And that was the other thing. And of course, we have the numbers right in front of us. But before I've even looked at the numbers, the other thing I had written down in my notes, just watching the game on top of team defense and turnovers, the other thing that I could point to was rebounding.
It's actually 48-47. We actually
Which is
won the rebounding
That's
battle.
crazy. That's crazy. And I see that. I see that right here. But watching the game,
It
you
felt
know,
like they got a lot
on
of extra possessions for sure, and even offensive rebounding, they only beat us by 1. Um, so I definitely felt that way, but I guess the numbers don't
obviously,
lie.
right.
But there was I mean, it helps when Victor had what, 10? I mean, we were still getting rebounds. It was just like they were getting into the paint so easily that maybe it just felt like they were getting rebounds when in reality they
Well,
were just putting both feet in the lane multiple times.
and I'm sure if we put up the bench rebounding numbers,
It's probably
then
fair.
that would be, a very different. But I know that sometimes when you watch games, the eye test can be a little bit different than the numbers. So this is, that is a good point there for sure. And I think that's also a testament, to some of our lack of offensive execution in this
Yeah.
game. And another thing that I just want to hit on here as we're kind of, breaking this game down, Ethan, moving forward with the De'Aaron Fox trade, I think you and I we're gonna up the ante on how we view things, on kind of how we criticize things. That's not to say
Mhm.
that we're gonna go completely crazy, but like on a night like tonight, I'll just mention this since we're breaking down the game. Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson. This is a night where we needed to have better shooting nights from them. Just straight up, period. Because if they have better nights and provide some energy, and obviously Keldon was able to get to the line to at least contribute something while going 1 for 8. Um, and him defensively, Mitch Johnson, I saw on Twitter that he was ripping him in the huddle, and there was one play in the third quarter where it was like Keldon just got, I think it was Gigi Jackson when he was matched up with him on the perimeter on the
Mhm.
right wing, where Gigi just drives right past him,
Yep.
and everybody else was doing their job, and that was on Keldon. And me and you have been, we've been the people who have been like, hey, we want to look at this from a 360-degree view, a 20,000-foot view, understand these guys are 24, 25, but especially with the situation now, as well as them being 24, 25 and being paid 20 million plus, both of them, on a night like tonight with the circumstances, with being down guys in the rotation, waiting for De'Aaron Fox, and we'll see if Jordan McLaughlin plays. I know he's got some minutes with other teams, but still 2 rotation guys
Right.
potentially that are coming, and I know we're waiting for them. And we just shipped out Trey Jones and Zach Collins, even though Zach was out. Trey was a body that was playing consistent minutes, and it made some plays recently. Um, Basically, with
Mhm.
all of that being said, as much as there is some context there, on a night like tonight, this is where you need Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson to step up. And unfortunately, they were not able to rise to the occasion tonight. And for every time that we have a criticism like that, me and Ethan understand where we are. We're fans watching at home.
Right.
We're not the same, we're not trying to sit here and say we know basketball better than these guys or lecture them on what they're doing on the court. But as fans, analyzing the game here. And I think Keldon and Devin Vassell would say tonight that they both needed to be better.
For sure. I take this with a grain of salt. I still want to see the current lineup with De'Aaron Fox inserted just to see if that opens things up for
Right.
Devin Vassell. But I'm starting to lean toward the idea of putting him back on the bench, Jude, as a six man to allow him to just kind of let the game come to him and be that number one scoring option. Maybe that unlocks something for him because I do remember when he came back from injury, when he was on that minutes restriction, he was electrifying in his first couple games back. And since being reinserted into the starting lineup, it's been up and down with consistency issues, especially shooting the ball, which is odd because last year that was probably his best feature, was just catch and shoot threes, and that's been kind of difficult for him thus far. The Keldon thing, I don't have an immediate solution. Honestly, I think he's just going to be this kind of player for the rest of his career, and
Right.
we have to hope that CP3 going to the bench helps him because again, he's especially without Trey Jones tonight. I mean, he's been inconsistent all year, but Keldon needs
Mhm.
somebody to kind of get him going. And when he's the guy off the bench to kind of manipulate the offense, it's not pretty to watch. Like I feel like he needs a player next to him to kind of lead the way. Um, but I'm starting to think insert Julian Champagny into the starting lineup next to Stefan as just a 3-and-D floor spacer, and then let Devin Vassell be a 3-level scorer off the bench and see if maybe that's a solution.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think there's a lot of things that we can consider, and I think with De'Aaron Fox coming in, that only ups the ante and just makes it where, hey, we're gonna do straight up what's best for the team. Regardless, this isn't the same 22-60 Spurs, where you can kind of let Devin Vassell and Keldon
Mhm.
and Jeremy, like in the 2022 season before the Victor lottery, just kind of let them do whatever they want. And even we were on here and we're kind of just laissez-faire with it because we
Right.
understood the situation and the circumstances. And now it's different. So, I mean, I gave my lineup predictions in the reaction that I made last night. And what I am predicting and what I said was, I mean, it's basically essentially the same starting lineup that we have right now, except move CP3 to the bench and insert De'Aaron Fox.
Mhm.
But with your point, I think you're making some great points about Devin in the starting lineup. I'm not opposed to moving him to the bench as kind of a six man where he can be more of the creator, you know what I mean? And just have the ball in his hands. Obviously, in this situation, he would still be playing next to Chris Paul. So
Mhm.
that would, there would still be a lot of ball handling duties for CP3. But again, as we've talked about, and I think as we have seen a little bit, despite the struggles in this game, and I believe there was another 6-point game that he had recently. I don't know if that was against the Heat or somebody else, but I know before then we had that stretch of 5 straight 20-point games. The point I'm trying to get to here is we have seen Devin kind of become a little bit more comfortable off the ball next to Chris Paul, where kind of initially when he was put into the starting lineup, that was something that, didn't translate as well. So anyways, I think
Yeah.
off the bench, he can play next to Chris Paul, but and be able to be an off-ball shooter as well. But I also think that playing off the bench allows him to kind of use more of his isolation ability. And just because he's surrounded by less talent, frankly, that
Mhm.
opens up more looks for him and allows for him to kind of play his game more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's not to be seen as a demotion or
Right.
anything like that. Every other team that's competing for a playoff spot has a guy that comes in off the bench that's an immediate spark plug and upgrade, right? Like you're going to get 15 points from this guy on any given night, and he's going to be a problem for the opponent's bench defense, right? I don't think we have that. We thought that was going to be Keldon Johnson. I
Hmm.
don't think that's him. He plays off the ball. He's a cutter. He's a pick guy, and he occasionally hits a three. But right now, it's been a little inconsistent in the starting lineup. But I do still want to see him next to De'Aaron just to see if that unlocks something.
Right.
And there was a comment, a couple comments back, Jude, about what quality of shots from Devin and Keldon,
Hmm.
just like when they're
Let
taking
me
them,
go find it. Keep going.
and something that I noticed tonight, the difference between when we were competing for championships and that ball movement versus now. Uh,
Hmm.
we made the open pass to the guy, whether or not it meant we were going to get an assist, right? I feel
Yeah.
like our team now, we don't make the pass if we don't think it's going to lead to an assist. And my example would be there were a
Yeah.
couple of moments where um, either Bassie or Jeremy Sohan were open in the corner or on the wing, and we didn't make the pass because obviously they're not 3-point shooters.
Right.
So instead, we either turned the ball over or took a really bad contested layup. In 2014, we make that pass. Why? Because Thiago Splitter, Boris Diaw, they're going to make the
Right.
next pass. They're going to make the hockey assist.
Yes.
And whether or not the pass leads to a shot, it doesn't matter. You should feel comfortable in that next guy being able to make a play for somebody else. And I don't think we're at that level yet. Maybe that's something De'Aaron can help bring to this team as an all-star level point guard that can get you 25 and 7. But right now we haven't made that shift in our mentality.
I think that first Pacers game in France is probably the closest thing that I've seen to that, what you're referencing. And that's basically what we said kind of when we recapped that game in the podcast we recorded.
Yeah,
That
those are the
felt like
closest.
closest thing to the beautiful game ball movement. And definitely in tonight's game, man, you saw a lot of times where you could have just kept swinging the ball to have that constant ball movement. It's like you said, it's not about it leading to a score. It's about constantly swinging the ball and playing in that free flow, if you will. Um, and yeah, tonight you saw the ball stop a lot. So I think that was something you saw a lot tonight, and I think that's a great example.
Yeah, ball stoppage and turnovers. I think that's the number one thing. That's just stupid plays, things that we should be able to
Mm-hmm.
control. We can't control the matchups. We can't control that they have like 4 7-footers. That just is what it
Mm-hmm.
is. But we can control whether or not we make stupid plays. And tonight we made far too many.
As well as execution, from some of the guys that we harped on. Mainly, I
Yeah.
hate to put it this way, but mainly Devin and Kelvin tonight. Now, here's the one thing I will say, as if you want to have one little asterisk or caveat, De'Aaron Fox probably helps out with a lot of the issues we have tonight. Even if we have the same issues, just 25 right there. I know that
Yeah.
simplifies it. I know that oversimplifies things. Those guys still have to improve in these areas that we're talking about. But adding De'Aaron Fox to the team we saw tonight, at the least, makes this a close loss.
For sure. I think the biggest thing that we were missing tonight was actually Trey Jones' pace of play off the
Right.
bench. What does De'Aaron Fox do better than literally anybody else in the NBA? Push the pace. He is Fox. He is the fastest point guard in the league, I think. So add that with his 25 points per game and his 7 assists that he's likely going to get us. And I think he's the second best point guard at pick and roll play to who? Chris Paul in terms of like points per pick and
Mm-hmm.
roll. I think is that official stat, which is something weird that they track now. But he is the second best at that. So bringing him in as a pick and roll partner with Victor Wembanyama. You have floor spacing with Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes. You have a defensive madman who's been playing really, really well, and Stephon Castle, and shot 2 of 5 tonight from 3. I don't envision that being consistent moving forward, but I think he fits like a glove, and he will allow us to play a lot faster. And he's a former clutch player of the year. So these fourth quarter
Mm-hmm.
execution issues, Jude, that we've been noticing, where it's like, okay, who's taking the shot? If it's not Victor, and we have inconsistency amongst other players, we don't have to worry about that anymore. If it's not Victor taking the shot, it's going to be Swipa, De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah, man. I mean, this guy earlier this year, Ethan, I forget, this guy scored 60 points. And
Yeah.
then in the game after that, I'm pretty sure it was either like 51 or something like that. It was like 109 points in 2 games or 2 days. I think it was a back-to-back. Y'all can correct me on that in the comments. I know that for a fact he had the 60-point game. So
Mhm.
that's the type of person that we're bringing in. And I think that, again, like you said, in late game execution or, like a lot of the runs that we saw tonight, they're probably stalled in the first place because we have another all-star level scorer.
Yeah, my only question would be, um, can he maintain that volume of shots next to Victor? I think it's a yes. But if it is a yes, this correct me if I'm wrong, Drew. This will be the first time Victor's played with somebody that can average 20 plus points per game. Because
Yeah. You want to hear my first honest gut reaction to that?
what?
I was like, well, you just played with Keldon Johnson.
Yeah, but like simultaneously,
No, I'm sorry. Obviously, that doesn't count.
at the same time as Victor.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know this off the top of my head, but I'm curious how many other All Stars play with somebody on their
Right.
team that also averages 20 points per game. You got to think it's most of them.
Right. Yeah.
right? AD and Luca, Kyrie,
Tyrese and Embiid.
Tyrese and Embiid, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown didn't make the All Star game. No, he did. He did make the All Star game. But I think you get my point. For every
Kawhi, James Harden.
Batman,
Right.
there's a Robin who was equally as deserving of an All Star game. I think we can safely say, other than Victor Wembanyama, there's nobody else on our team that even came close to sniffing the All Star game. Now we have that guy, and all reports point to that he wants to be in San Antonio long term, and we're going to have to pay him, and that's just the nature of the NBA. We'll give him a contract extension. But on paper, everything should fit, Jude.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I'm really excited for that, and I know you were kind of just jumping into that a little bit, and obviously kind of we ended the episode with that, kind of wrapping that up there. Saying how obviously bringing him in is going to solve a lot of the issues that we discussed, but just to dish it to you for your reaction, man. I know obviously you had something going on last night. I don't know if I was the person who let you know, but
Mm.
kind of a twofold question here. What was your reaction with everything that happened last night? Because we didn't get that. And then two, and I know you touched on it a little bit, but how do you think he fits on the court? With that starting lineup we talked about, and just our personnel. So your reaction, and then also how you think he fits with the Spurs.
Well, last night, not to get too personal for everybody that's listening, I was having a terrible time helping my sister move into an apartment. And if you've ever helped anyone move, you know how
Oh,
miserable it is to just assemble furniture and stuff. But as I was on the floor, on my hands and knees, cussing at myself, trying to screw in this piece of shit uh, fake wood entertainment center at 9 o'clock at night, I could hear my phone buzzing, and I literally like stood up and was like, I bet the Spurs made a trade, but I didn't know for sure. And like an hour later, as I crawled into my car, I looked at my phone, Jude, and it was like I was shams. I had a billion texts, like because people just think I'm into some kind of insider because I talk to you about the Spurs on the internet,
right.
which I'm not an insider. But my immediate reaction was kind of muffled because like I was just like so exhausted, but I was like, oh great. And like I told my sister and I told my girlfriend and they were like, "Who?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm not with people that I can talk to about this." But on the way home, I called a few folks and that kind of got my excitement back up, Jude. And I was like, "Okay, we got our guy. We have our guy. This is a great move. We didn't trade anybody really other than Trey Jones and Zach Collins and CD Sissoko, great guy, but he's still really raw and a
Hmm.
young second round talent. Like we got to keep Keldon, we got to keep Devin, we got to keep Stephon, and we got to keep Atlanta's first round picks. And to me, it felt like a fleece. I listened to your thing, and I think that that's what really rings true in my head. Is it feels like we stole this, and based on my analysis of Twitter and YouTube commentary, it feels like most of the world thinks that the Spurs won this. And the question is, why would the Bulls help us do this? But shout out Chicago. I don't know who their GM is, but God bless that man or woman. Um, because Zach Levine is really the only reason the Sacramento Kings said yes to this deal. So you got to bless them with everything like we got to give them a win or something. I hope Matas Buzelis is the next big thing because they're the reason that this deal got done. Um, and in terms of fit with the team, like I said, I think he's an incredible floor general. Uh, pace of play is incredible. He's obviously a very clutch player. Sure, he shoots sub 35% from three, but if you've played against him, you know that in key moments he's going to knock those down. And he's only progressed in that regard, and he's still able to get 25 points a game, Jude, shooting less than
Yeah.
35% from three. So I'm not worried about that. He's not going to be relegated to a corner. This is a guy we're going to give the ball to and let him play high pick and roll with Victor Wembanyama. Like he's going to be taking mid-range jump shots. He's going to be taking floaters, layups at the rim. He's a very physical finisher despite being, small frame. So I think he fits like a glove. He's a long-term point guard. He can play off of Stephon Castle. He's played next to other point guards in Sacramento. They've run rotations where they have two small guards in their lineup, and they were in the playoff picture the last couple of years. I think it fits. And I saw some comments about his defense. I actually think he's a solid defender. He's not going to like lock someone up like a Stefan Castle. But I think he plays smart defense. He gets his hands in passing lanes. I'm pretty sure he's always high in the steals count. And I know that's not a
Yeah.
representation of how great of a defender you are.
He's averaging 1.5 steals this season.
Yeah, that's like I would quantify that as like a Chris Paul style defender. Would we say Chris Paul sits in the
Eh,
chair and locks anyone up? Not really, but he's top 3 in assists or
I'd
steals of
say
all time.
De'Aaron's better than
He's
Chris
more
Paul
physical for
defensively.
sure.
Even like Chris Paul, prime Chris Paul, I think that this version of De'Aaron is even better than him. I mean, that's kind of why they call him Swipe of the Fox. Like, I know it's because he's fast, but it's also because of his steals.
Mm,
And that kind of came up
exactly.
during his time at Kentucky. Anyways,
So you're good. Final thoughts. I think that the trade itself is an A plus, and then fit with the team. I'm gonna give it an A minus, and the only reason it's not a plus is because I still think we're one great player away from being like championship level, obviously.
hmm
And I
hmm
don't know if that's going to be Stefan Castle. I don't know if that's going to be a guy we draft this year or a guy that we sign or trade for in the future. But that's the only reason it's not an A plus is because the pairing of just him and just Victor Wembanyama, I don't think is enough to get us to the promised land yet.
What are your thoughts on our playoff outlook? Because that was another thing I discussed last night.
I did hear that. Jude, I think if we don't make the play in, it's a failure. Honestly, I think we need to be pushing for that 8 or 7 seed. The only reason I'm not saying guaranteed top 6 is because the West is so competitive even still,
hmm
and those teams in the top 6, other than Dallas and LA, really haven't changed all that much, and even though they changed, they're still both very good, so I don't think they're gonna drop out of that picture, but I think we absolutely need to go on a run. This will be interesting because he's coming into the team on the rodeo road trip, so he's not gonna be in
Yes.
San Antonio until mid-March or early March, excuse me. So this will be a real test of our, of our team camaraderie and ability to
hmm
stay connected on the road, because we're gonna need to win a lot of these games in order to get into that play-in picture. But that has to be our goal, 100%. And I think that we definitely are within that capability.
And if our goal is to get to the play-in and try to win games, a road trip like that, like those set of circumstances, it's a tough set of circumstances. But if we're gonna do that, it's kind of the perfect set of circumstances to propel us forward after that, as much as it's a challenge.
For sure. And M Easy, I see your steals doesn't make a good defender. Just rewind the video. I believe I said that. Um, but thank you for being here, for commenting as well.
Yeah, I guess what I would say there, I think you can for sure maybe criticize some physicality things or some like on ball defense stuff with
He's not going
De'Aaron.
to make a
But
defensive first or second team, but I don't think he's a bad defender.
I was gonna say I still think he's a pretty solid on ball defender on top of being good at steals as well. But I think that's really besides the point when it comes to this here. I still think I think if we've been able to manage the improvement that we've been able to have with a 40-year-old Chris Paul out there still
Hmm.
making some plays defensively, I think De'Aaron Fox is gonna be just fine, if not an upgrade. And on top of that, again, the scoring ability and the clutch ability on top of, again, just having the attention that he is going to draw, having another true all-star player, as well as a point guard that you can pair with Victor in the pick and roll. That is what matters
Hmm.
whenever it comes to De'Aaron Fox coming to San Antonio, at least for me when I think about it.
Just think about how great De'Aaron and Sabonis were together in the pick and roll and as a tag team duo. Uh,
Yeah.
and Sabonis can't even shoot.
hmm
Now he's got somebody that can do almost everything Sabonis can. Sabonis, I think, is obviously more physical. He's going to get more rebounds than Wemby, but he can do all that, and he can shoot. He can create his own shot off the dribble. This is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. And if we're playing, here's another thing about the defensive conversation. If we're playing him next to Steph, if you really are concerned about, him in a one-on-one matchup, then just throw Steph on that guard.
That's literally what I was going to say. We still have Stephon Castle
And Jeremy Sohan for that matter when we're talking defense.
and Jeremy Sohan. Uh, I think this puts us in a much better place than we were last week. Let's
Yeah,
put it that way.
absolutely. Okay, let's wrap up the conversation here, Ethan. I got some. We've been talking about all the good, and obviously it is so good. There's really nothing, not another way that you can put it as a Spurs fan. But when we look at the team, in this lens now with De'Aaron Fox on it, and these rotations that we're talking about, what are the keys that stick out to you for if we want to make that play-in race and maybe like win a game and try to get into a series or something like that, or maybe even jump up into the 7 or 8 range? If we want to accomplish that goal of getting to the playoffs, what are the things that kind of stand in the way right now when it comes to the makeup of the team, on the court?
Obviously, we don't have a backup center right now. Bassey's doing his absolute best in key moments. We have Mamu, but the Jeremy Sohan at backup center is not working. I'm fine with Jeremy coming in off the bench, but as a power forward, please let's find a solution at that center spot, whether that be through a trade or the buyout market. If we have to wait till offseason, that's fine, but we're going to need a lot more minutes from Charles Bassey because the Sohan thing is just not working right now. Um, and then I would just say gelling together. Like that's been an issue without De'Aaron Fox, but suddenly we add
Hmm.
an all-star level guy like that. It's going to take some time. There's gonna be some messy moments, I'm sure, but we want to make the play-in tournament, so we're gonna have very little patience
Yeah.
despite that. Um, so that's going to be in the way. You only hope that the talent level of him coming into this team is enough to overcome any difficulties as far as chemistry and cohesion, offensively and defensively.
And that's kind of the point we were making when we talked about this game. Potentially that, what he brings can overcome that. But I still think there are some things in our control and other players' control that we're going to need to improve to get where we want to go. And like you said, Ethan, despite the circumstances, it's not going to be like, earlier in the season where we're like, hey, Devin Vassell's kind of getting back in, working into the injury. Now with De'Aaron Fox being added, and especially the time in the season, we don't really have time to lose more games if we want to accomplish that. So the ante is going to be upped despite, the context of the circumstances. And so I think really the rest of our roster, our bench, playing consistently, I think that's
Mhm.
something that could potentially stand in the way. But I think obviously, the things that you touched on as well are going to be keys when it comes to that backup center position. I mean, that's something that's going to be huge when it comes to the makeup of the team. We'll see if there's a potential move that the Spurs make later this week. I feel like with the depth the Spurs have right now, we were texting about this, but we hadn't mentioned it on stream yet. That makes me almost feel like the Spurs aren't going to make a trade for the rest of the season, or at least, I mean, for this week, obviously, not the rest of the season because the deadline's
Mhm.
this week. Um, when it comes to that backup center spot, and as much as I do have some faith in Charles. Like I did see some good things when he came in, tonight, and helped out matching with Zach Edey. We also have an open roster spot. I forgot to mention that as well. So maybe we could sign somebody as well. Maybe that's a reason that we could be a sign that we're making a move. I don't know. I know I'm kind of going all over the place with that. There's some options that the Spurs have there at that backup center position, but when it comes to getting to the playoff, like you said, or like I was saying earlier, the bench, being able to execute like a Devin Vassell or a Keldon Johnson, we're going to need consistent plays from them. We can't have the night like we had tonight. We can't have that being a norm, when we're playing with De'Aaron Fox, for the first time. And it's just like that's
Yeah.
happening every night. That's something that we can't see. Um, but also, I don't think that we need them to be superhumans either, because I think what De'Aaron brings is going to make up for at least some of the mistakes that we already have right now. But again, if we don't have any contributions from them, or we have just a consistent, subpar level of contributions, that could still lead to close losses.
Yeah, I think the games will be a lot more competitive just from the sheer fact that we have De'Aaron Fox on the team. Like I know we've
Hmm.
lost 10 of our last 13, and it's been a real struggle session. Just other than that first game in
Yeah.
against Indiana in France, but um, I just have a lot of faith. Maybe I'm looking at this through Spurs colored lenses, Jude. I just have a lot of faith in the ability of De'Aaron Fox and what he can bring to this team. But I totally see where you're coming from. Um, the one open roster spot, my pipe dream is that we're able to get somebody off the buyout market.
Hmm.
It'll be difficult because I feel like a lot of those guys want to go to a contender. However, what's the rule? If they're making the mid-level exception or more,
Yes.
like the top 10 teams basically can't sign them because they're already under the whatever apron.
Yeah.
I'm really butchering this, but basically
But I know what you're talking about, though.
in short, the
Cat
Spurs might
stuff.
have more of an ability to sign somebody off of a buyout than you'd think because of restrictions around the cap in the NBA. Um, I like some of the names in the comments. I see Jericho Sims. I say
Mhm.
Daron Sharp. I think of Nick Claxton, who might be available via trade, not necessarily buyout. Drew Eubanks would be funny, although I think he's pretty much set in Clipper land.
Yeah,
Um,
same with Barlow in Atlanta.
Unfortunately, a lot of the big names that are gonna be impactful, though, I feel like are guards or wings right now. Like, I think of Lonzo Ball. I think of, who's the guy in is it not in the with the Wizards right now? He played for Boston and Indiana. Uh,
I can't believe I'm
he
blanking
won
here.
Rookie of the Year, but he's one of the most Malcolm Brogdon.
Okay, okay.
Malcolm
I was like,
Brogdon
Michael
is
Carter
available.
Williams, but he
No,
didn't
not
play for
Michael
them?
Carter Williams. Malcolm Brogdon, and there's a few other names that are PJ Tucker, who's a good defender, right? But I think we're a backup center and a solid 3 and D guy off the bench away from being really, really safe in that playoff contention mode. I just don't think we're going to find both of those in the next 6 days
Yeah, and I
or
think
5 days.
and when you talk about the 3 and D shooter is kind of another need that we would like. That's I think when I'm talking about the Devin and Keldon stuff, maybe potentially holding us back in a game if both of them have bad shooting nights. Um, that kind of ties into that as well, because you just that's where we're looking for that consistent shooting. So if we can get that from them, then that becomes less of a need. But I think that's why that and backup center are kind of the things that stand out in our mind right now, because really we don't just have a role play. Well, I guess you could maybe argue Champagny and Harrison, but again, they're not like a Doug McDermott like type of player. Does that make sense? Like Julian kinda is, but Harrison definitely, he'll do a lot more as much as he can be a catch and shoot guy.
Honestly, Jude, we might just be a good old fashioned Coach Popovich scream session away from Keldon, Devin just buying into their new
That's true.
roles and really becoming what we need, and that's better defensive minded players, role players that aren't going to take bad shots and stay within themselves on a team.
Yeah, I think you summed that up uh, completely perfectly there. Um, and yeah, it's just again that the ante is up for both of those guys. And as we go into, I just wanted to, and like you said there, Ethan, as we wrap this up, um, I'm with you. I think De'Aaron Fox is just going to fix a lot of this. Like, not to be Spurs colored glasses, not to just be a fan and say everything's going to be fine and everything's going to work out, and there's going to be no issues. And let's just shoo away all the issues that we saw on the floor tonight. That's not what we're saying. But adding 25 or a dude who can get you 60, an all-star point guard with the speed that he has, again, with the ability that he'll have in a pick and roll with Victor Wembanyama, with the type of attention that Wemby's going to draw that will leave attention off of him, because as much as he did have guys like DeMar DeRozan and Domantas Sabonis, Wemby is still a different enigma in himself, and obviously he's going to draw. He, as much as, like I said, De'Aaron Fox is still going to have attention on him for sure. Being next to Wemby will free things up for him as allow for him to play make, for other guys with the amount of attention that will be on those two. But I did want to talk about, just some of the things that could potentially hold us back. So it's not just all like, oh, it's going to work out because, De'Aaron Fox is coming in. As much as, in a sense, that is kind of true to an extent.
If this was 2K, we'd be fine. But this
Right.
is reality, so we have to see how this plays out.
Yes, yes. But definitely we'll be watching that interior defense. We'll be watching perimeter shooting from the role players. And then, of course, basking in the glory of what our new offense and new system is going to look like under De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama. And Winky's cheering. I heard him.
Yep, he's right here. He's screaming my name. He hates the computer.
Any final thoughts on the outlook for De'Aaron Fox moving forward, Ethan?
I think positive. I think we're in a really, really good place. looking forward to the kind of pieces that we can kind of bring in the offseason around him and Victor, and see what kind of noise we can make going into the play-in tournament this season, Jude.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'm also very happy to just kind of be focused on winning games because as much as we want
Yeah.
to be, we want to have the contextual view. Like that actually can get frustrating for us because at some point there's only so much you can say. Where now it's like, hey, we can just look to that and point to it. Like, okay,
Mhm.
if Devin went 5 for 15 and this is a night where Wemby has 30 and De'Aaron Fox has 30 and we lose by 10, that's
That's the
something.
problem.
Yeah, like we can point to that and it's not like all these different, contextual things we have to think about. So I'm super excited to see our first game this Wednesday, which we will be having a post game for that. I think it hasn't been officially announced, but I'm like 95% sure that will be De'Aaron Fox's debut game. So we're excited to recap that one with you guys. And before we leave, I've just been seeing Robert Ball he's been putting this in here a couple times. Devin only shooting 43.5% from the field this season, 103rd from the NBA, as well as Devin shooting below average from three. Robert, I saw those comments earlier. I swear we weren't trying to ignore you. It's just we also want to try to stay on topic of what we're talking about as well.
That goes for pretty much everybody in here if your comment was ignored.
Yes,
Vehemently.
that too. My response to this I would like to see some improvement shooting wise from Devin. I think the context of the injury as well as all the other stuff we've talked about matters, but at this point, because he's had a certain amount of time, we saw the stretch of 5 games where he had 20, so we know he's knocked the rust off. On top of De'Aaron Fox coming in, only emphasizes that more and more. We need to see improved efficiency from Devin. What would you say, Ethan?
That 100%. Feel like we've been talking about that for like 4 weeks now. Just the consistency in his game, not just from three, but everywhere. It's been hit and miss. So that's definitely something that needs to be improved because we've had a sample size now on the bench as well as in the starting lineup, uh, surrounding the rest of the guys. So now we're going to give him like a couple games with De'Aaron before we start really, you know, pulling or not pulling our punches, I guess.
This is the final comment. Robert Ball says Winky needs to come off the bench.
Bro is literally pushing my mic stand and like scratching his face on my computer right now. He's like livid. He slept all day and now he wants to play.
Do you think that Winky would have provided the fluidity offensively at the point guard position off the bench tonight that we needed?
I don't know about fluidity, but he certainly would have played with high energy.
There we
Uh,
go. Lots
he
of
would
intensity.
super intense on ball defense is his specialty.
Okay, good to know.
No string toy gets past this guy. I tell you what.
He's like Point Sohan, but in the body of an actual point guard.
There we go. Let's get
There
some
we go.
winky minutes.
Winky minutes logged. We appreciate you guys. We will be back Wednesday for what will be probably the most anticipated Spurs game. I mean, would you say this is the most anticipated Spurs game since the 2017 Western Conference Finals?
Oh, yeah. Well, I will say I was pretty excited for Game 7, Spurs Nuggets round 1.
I forgot about that. Okay, I'm hating on Derek too. My man Derek had 36 and went crazy. Oh my goodness.
Game 6, Derek, baby.
Game 6, Derek, and post game Winky.
Biting my arm.
Thank y'all for hanging out with us tonight. If you enjoyed the content, hit that like and that subscribe button. If you want to stay updated with the show, follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch y'all on the next one. Go Spurs, go Foxes.